Welcome back everyone, it is Eric from Rare Candy, and today I'm back with another Scarlet and Violet deck profile, but this time we're going to switch things up and take a look at a new single price deck. That is going to be the brand new Maushold. I will say right up front though, I don't think this deck is probably winning your next regional or anything like that, strictly because this deck really doesn't have any way at beating the Lost Zone decks out there. But I will say Maushold actually does hit for really good numbers against a lot of the 2-prize Pokemon like Pokemon V-Star. And just a quick heads up if you couldn't tell from the graphic on screen, today's video is brought to you at the request of Austin Knowles, one of Rare Candy's patrons. Big shout out to Austin for all of his support over there on Patreon. And also guys, just as a reminder, Scarlet and Violet is right around the corner, and if you are thinking about picking up any cards from this set, friends of the channel over at flipsidegaming.com are still taking pre-orders on sealed product. Use coupon code RARECANDY for 10% off, and they'll give you free shipping too. But if Flipside is out of stock by the time you find this video, you can also use my affiliate link with TCGPlayer. They'll show you all of the next cheapest listings online, and it really does help support the channel. Links to everything today will be down below in the description. But that being said, let's get into this deck list. So up first, we do have 4 copies of Tandem Mouse, and I will actually point out there's 2 different ones we can pick from. Ultimately though, I did settle on this one only because it has 40 HP instead of 30 HP. I think the attack on the other one's probably a little bit better, but the 40 HP on this one does put us out of range of Reggie Lucky V being able to knock us out on their first turn. But more importantly, we have the star of the show today. That is going to be the brand new Maushold. So right off the bat, one of the things I like most about this card is just that it has kind of a low amount of HP, which might sound a little bit odd, but this does make the entire evolution line level ball searchable, which is great for more easily being able to set up these attackers. The second attack is really the reason we are choosing to play this card for 2 colorless energy, the 70 for each Maushold that we have in play. So if we just run through the math, if we have all 4 of these in play, that's going to be 280 damage, taking a clean one-shot on any Pokemon V-Star. Now, there definitely are some challenges with this attack, most notably probably being that after a Maushold goes down, you can't actually retrieve it with something like a Rescue Carrier or Clara and get it back into play that same turn. So for that reason, we're playing a 4/4 Zoroark line. And what this enables us to do is that once a Maushold goes down, we can actually use that Phantom Transformation ability and transform this Zoroark back into a Maushold immediately to keep our damage output maxed out. And also in games that we might prize a Tandem Mouse, this is actually an alternate way at getting an additional Maushold into play too. But the other challenge that we have to overcome with this deck is the fact that we are losing twin energy in the rotation, and outside of our 4 double turbo energies, we're going to need an alternate way to be able to power up a Maushold in a single turn. And that's where the new Armourouge is going to come into play, but we are choosing to play 2 of this Char Cadet. I want to point out, it does have less HP than the other one coming out, but again, since we are conceding that we're just going to lose to Lost Box, I think this one probably has the better attack to be able to use. It's just 30 and you discard the energy, but every now and again that 30 damage can set up a knockout for your Maushold on future turns. And then from there, we have its evolution. We have the brand new Armourouge. The ability is the reason we're playing this. It allows us to move our fire energy in play to our active Pokemon. So what we can actually do with this deck is we can use a Magma Basin to accelerate energy onto our Armourouge, move that energy to our active, and then manually attach another fire energy to be able to finish powering up our attacker. Yes, this is a little bit clunkier than just playing 4 twin energy pre-rotation, but hey, we have to make the best of what we have in this new post-rotation format. But going back to Zoroark for a minute, one of the benefits from playing Zoroark is that we actually gain access to potentially a number of other Stage 1 Pokemon we can transform into. One of them is going to be Mighty Yenna. This is a card that can really tip the Mew matchup a little bit more in our favor, because we attack for free if they have a Pokemon VMAX in play, and then it does 160, which is kind of a perfect number to one-shot Mew, assuming they don't have Oricorio in play. But from there, we also have a copy of the Pokemon Go Slowbro. This ideally is going to be a way of closing out the game with that Twilight Inspiration attack. If our opponent does have just a single prize remaining, we can take 2 prize cards. So instead of having to cobble together all 4 Maushold for another giant attack for our last knockout, well, we can just use Slowbro instead, just make the whole process a little bit easier. And the last Pokemon we're playing is a copy of Radiant Charizard. So since we're already playing Fire Energy, the card's probably too good not to play. Of course, has that Excited Heart ability that reduces our attack cost for every prize card our opponent has taken. So in the late game, that is going to make that Combustion Blast attack much more manageable to get up and running. And again, kind of like with Slowbro, this is just an alternate way to be able to take multiple prize cards without needing all 4 Maushold in play. So one thing you may notice is that there's actually no copies of Manaphy in this list. That might look really weird, but like I said, guys, we are just conceding we're gonna lose to Lost Box. Manaphy is not gonna fix that matchup for you. And outside of Lost Zone based decks, I'm not expecting a whole lot of bench sniping happening. But getting into our supporters, we have 4 copies of Professor's Research just to discard our hand and draw 7. Since this deck really doesn't have the bench space for some sort of strong draw engine, we just have to make sure every supporter that we play is going to see us a ton of cards. And we don't even mind the discard effect since we can put things like Fire Energy or even some of our stage 1s into the discard throughout the game. And keeping with that theme of trying to see a ton of cards, we have 2 copies of Bruno up next. We shuffle in and get 4, which isn't that great, but if something was knocked out on our opponent's last turn, we shuffle in and get 7 instead. And since we're going to be forcing our opponent to take 6 individual knockouts, there's so many turns where this draw 7 effect is going to be live. And similarly, we also have 2 copies of Cynthia's Ambition. We draw until we have 5 cards in hand, but like with Bruno, if something was knocked out in the previous turn, we can draw up until 8. And then to round out our supporter cards, we have 2 copies of Serena. Obviously, we can't draw quite as aggressively with this. We just have a draw up to 5 effect, but of course we're playing Serena because it does give us the flexibility of being able to gust up a Pokemon V. For our stadium of choice, we have 3 copies of Magma Basin. We accelerate a Fire Energy out of our discard to one of our bench fire Pokemon, but they do take 2 damage counters. So like I mentioned, we accelerate the energy to Armor Rouge and move that up to our Maushold to be able to attack. We have 4 copies of Level Ball, which I definitely think is going to be our best ball search card in the deck. We get a Pokemon with 90 HP or less and put it into our hand. That finds all of our core basic Pokemon in the deck, as well as our copies of Maushold as well. But from there, we also have 4 copies of Nest Ball to be able to search out a basic Pokemon and put it directly onto our bench. So we need a ton of basic search in this deck just because we really do need to start filling our bench, start swarming these tandem mouse to be able to evolve as quickly as possible into our evolution. From there, we have 3 copies of Ultra Ball. We do have to discard 2 cards from our hand, but we do get any Pokemon, so obviously we can grab our basics, but we can also grab some of these more awkward Pokemon to find, like our Zoroark, our Armor Rouge, our Radiant Charizard, and also, like I mentioned in the case of Research too, we don't really mind discarding effects since we can put things like Fire Energy and also our Zoroark Stage 1 targets into the discard pile. And then for our last ball search card, we just have a copy of Hisuian Heavy Ball, just to be able to find a basic Pokemon out of our prizes and replace it with Heavy Ball. I think every deck hates prizing their important Pokemon, but specifically in this deck where our damage cap is directly tied to how many Maushold we can get in play, I think that makes Hisuian Heavy Ball disproportionately benefit a deck like ours. Up next though, we have a copy of Rescue Carrier to be able to get 2 Pokemon with 90 HP or less and put them back into our hand, which is perfect because the entire Maushold evolution line has 90 HP or less. Truth be told, even a second copy of this card really wouldn't be too bad. But just due to how tight space was, I had to go down to 1, and I think the rationale is, between the 1 copy and also Zoroark, we actually have a good bit of ways at keep chaining these Mausholds in play. And for our last item card, we have 1 copy of Pokegear 3.0. We look at the top 7 cards of our deck, get a supporter, and put it into our hand. So I think 10 draw supporters is actually a little bit low for a deck like this that has no sort of extra draw power. But to be honest, I really didn't feel the need for additional copies of any of our individual supporters. So that's why instead I am just playing a copy of Pokegear to give us essentially an 11th out to a way of drawing cards and also getting some flexibility over which supporter we actually might want to play. And for our last trainer card, we have 2 copies of the new Defiant Band. It says, as long as we're behind on prizes, the Pokemon this card is attached to does 30 more damage to our opponent's active. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of you were thinking, well, why not just play Choice Belt? It kind of does a similar thing. And the reason for that is just that we're really almost always going to be playing from behind with this deck, which makes Defiant Band a live card almost all of the time outside of like turn 1 or 2. And also a lot of the time, decks are going to be trying to force you into knocking out their single prize attackers to skew the prize trade back in their favor. And something like Choice Belt is not going to work on something like a Ston Journer as an example in the Lugia decks, or against their Archeops, or against the Shining Arcana Gardevoir from Gardevoir decks. And Defiant Band frequently will be the difference between needing an additional Maushold in play. And of course, it also does work against Pokemon EX, whereas Choice Belt will not. And as you would expect, we have 4 copies of Double Turbo Energy, so it does provide 2 energy, but it unfortunately does also come at the cost of reducing your damage by 20, which I will actually admit does feel kind of bad, because that actually does nerf your damage output to where you can't one-shot Pokemon VSTARs. But again, that's another reason why we do have the Defiant Band, as well as a reason that we're playing the 4 basic fire energies, because if we can power up Maushold with this, we get to keep our damage output absolutely maxed out. But I think a little bit more importantly, we're playing this kind of out of necessity. We need an alternate way of powering up our attackers in a single turn. And this whole combo of fire energy, basin, and Armor Rouge is probably one of our better options for that. So that's where I'm at right now with my Maushold list. And for what it is, I think this list is in a pretty decent spot. It's just kind of unfortunate, like I mentioned already, that this deck is going to lose so hard to those different Lost Zone based decks. But if the meta does shift away from Lost Zone based decks over the next couple sets, and or we get something akin to a Twin Energy reprint as well, I think this archetype actually could have some potential here. But what do you guys think about this Maushold deck? Do you think it has any promise in the future? Are there any cards in this list that you would change in the meantime? Let me know your full thoughts down below in the comment section. But as always guys, if you did enjoy today's content, remember to smack that like button. But if you're feeling a little extra generous and want to take that support to the next level, you can always become a patron over at patreon.com/rarecandytcg or pick up some merch at rarecandytcg.com. But as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.